Let you lead.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fittest. My guest today is Sarah Ford Bishop. Sarah's been on the podcast a couple of different times now. You're kind of an elite guest, actually.
Wow. I was thinking, this might be number three. I can't remember.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. As far as the Chick Chat girls are the only ones that have been, I've had a couple people back a second time, but I love talking with you. We have completely different, I think, I don't want to say perspectives, but we meet in the middle. And your knowledge and your education is very vast. And I love going to you for advice or discussing things with you. So anyways, welcome to the show again. How you doing?
I am good, thank you. Yeah, I feel like we always yeah, we have different backgrounds, but also same like philosophies, and yeah, it somehow like meets in the middle and whatnot. So good
Yeah,
to be.
yeah. So we were going to talk today a little bit about um like common, I think you called it low hanging fruit, which was kind of a cool.
Yeah, I forget who first called it that, but like thinking about like what are the easy pickings to start making some changes or transformations. Um, so yeah, the kind of the things that people think are basics, but they're not so basic when you go to implement them.
Yeah. And I know I kind of have a common theme when I get clients filling out assessment forms. And it's a lot of these things that I will, give them advice about, like, hey, this is where you can start making changes right away. I want to share like a quick story, and then maybe this will kind of set us off. So I went to go see my doctor a couple of days ago, and she was telling me how she was always a weekend warrior, and she does the Peloton bike and some strength training, but it would always be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So she'd do a 45-minute Peloton ride in the mornings, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and do two strength training. I don't really know what I don't know the details of what that looked like, but then they were going to go on a family vacation, and I don't exactly know how much time she gave herself, but she had put on her bikini and was like, oh, this is not good. Like, she felt like she was in a pretty decent spot, but she's like, so what do I need to do in order to pull off 5 or 10 pounds to get me to a better spot where I feel better about myself? And so she was like, I'm going to move I'm going to do 4 Peloton rides, and I'm going to move them so that there's like two in a space and two or something like that. And she goes, I decided to do 20-minute rides instead of 45-minute rides. And um and then she said, and then as far as her diet goes, she said, I had really not been paying attention to my diet at all. So I started tracking again, realizing that I wasn't getting nearly enough protein. And she said, and honestly, because I don't want to set this environment for, she has like teenage daughters, like being so strict around her kids, she would like measure out her food and everything after they left for school. And then her dinner was kind of a portioned free meal. So it didn't really look like I'm eating something different or structured or whatever like that. So, but she said her Peloton rides were much more efficient, and she was putting in the same amount of energy in a 20-minute ride that she was putting in 3 back-to-back 45-minute rides. And then over the period of, I would say probably like 2 months, she lost the weight that she wanted to do in order to get ready for her vacation. And I just think a lot of times people get really stuck and they think they're stuck, but it's these simple little baby steps, one little change that can make all the difference, right?
Yes. And I was worried that that story was going to go to like somewhere radical. Like she decided to do an hour Peloton every day and yada, yada, yada. But like, I love that. And that's what I feel like people don't realize, especially like people come to us and, usually like when they come to us, there's like a pain point, right? It's like, like your doctor, for example, like I put on the bikini and like it was like holy shit, like kind of got some awareness or whatever. Um, and they think that that means okay, now we have to dial it in, make a radical change. But a lot of times, if you just took 6 weeks, 2 months to just really focus on some foundations, your body might change and likely will change, even if the scale doesn't change that much. Your body composition, your just your energy, like your any like inflammation will fall off, like your stress levels will lower, like just kind of focusing on things like that, like movement throughout the week, more protein, balanced meals, sleep, like things like that. So instead of like coming at it from that place of like, oh, I've been messing around or I haven't been on it, like let's dial everything in 100% and be super strict and yada yada yada. It's like, oh, like okay, well, how about what after that then? Like what happens after you go on the vacation? Are you gonna go back to what are you gonna go back to? So absolutely.
Yeah, it was so, it just was enlightening. It was really, really cool. And I think a lot of people think that, oh, they have, like you said, a breaking point, which could be small, like putting on a bikini, or it just could be, just like some holy shit moment, like you said. Um, but you have to figure out then, like, well, what am I doing now? And I know, like, somebody like you, for example, is very disciplined and you have a goal and you're very structured with everything, but that is not, like, that's not for everybody, and not everybody can do that. And I think they don't have to think this is all or nothing, or I have to do a complete 180 in order to get some sort of results. Like, if you aren't exercising and you incorporate weight training 2 days a week, you will, you'll be able to adapt to that. And then, you can add more as you have time or whatever. But, you don't have to all of a sudden go to 5 days a week of strength training when
Right.
you've not even done it before,
And I think that's where I get a lot of my clients, because they're smart, they're educated, they're reading all about what's optimal, and they get so overwhelmed and they want to do the most optimal training plan, the most optimal nutrition plan. And it's like, whoa, let's, and I'm guilty of overusing the word optimal for sure. But optimal, like to me, is like, okay, what do you need, both your physiology and then your psychology? Like, what is optimal for you in your life, and your, health as a whole, including your mental health. And that will evolve. Like optimal for me right now, wasn't optimal for me a year ago, and it'll evolve as my journey does, and same with anyone else. So I think that's like a really, and it doesn't mean, like, I think people think like if there's at a place where they coach says, hey, we have to focus on some basics here, it's like ego hit, like, oh man, like basics, like I'm a beginner, like and it's like, well, no, like only because you're comparing to someone that maybe is very advanced or maybe has a slight screw loose like me, and like very like disciplined psycho kind of. So yeah, I think it's really important to kind of just keep those blinders on and consider what might be best for you.
Well, I love that you brought up the word optimal, because that's what I was thinking about. Like, optimal is what is optimal for you, not what is, because if you can't do it, if you can't adhere, obviously, like nothing is going to happen. And I think sometimes too, if someone is trying to do something for the long term, if you're trying to reach a physique goal for the long term, to take it slower is better, so that you can relearn behaviors, because it's these negative behaviors that got you in this situation in the first place. And in order for you to be able to adhere to those behaviors, you have to keep practicing them, because like you said, anybody can, like, they can go on a diet and lose the weight, but then what happens? Have you really learned how to practice these types of behaviors that got you there in the first place? So
Right.
yeah. So as far as optimal goes, I think something that is super popular, especially on social media, and especially in, like, I want to say, like, the wrong groups, and it was something that you and I wanted to talk about a little bit. People always like, well, my diet is bad, so I need to 100% revamp my diet. And so, yes, ideally, we would all be eating, whole foods all the time. That is ideal. Trying to find a balance, again, that's something that you can stick with, I think is really, really important, and it's different for everybody. But understanding that even though you could eat a diet of ice cream and donuts and be in a caloric deficit and, absolutely get some sort of a weight loss result, that's not going to be optimal because you're going to be missing out on nutrients and things that you need. So let's talk a little bit about that, the difference between whole foods and processed foods, if we're just going to label them in camps kind of generically that way, and what you think about that.
Yeah, so I think this is where like the whole like if it fits your macros or just tracking macros thing, like the like it became kind of mainstream and the education behind it kind of got forgotten about. And what I mean by that is I think originally like it was kind of presented as, hey, you don't always have to eat broccoli, like you can swap asparagus, or if you don't have a meltdown if the store's out of chicken, you can do tuna or turkey or whatever. So like that was kind of the original maybe thought process, or hey, like yeah, like a treat here and there isn't going to kill you and can fit in the plan. But yeah, I mean, like it really does matter. And like I hate to say good food, bad food, but
Right.
there really are good foods and better foods for you. And then there's foods that are less nutrient dense and we want to maybe minimize, or like when we do enjoy them, it's like part of like an occasion, or like it's not a majority of our day. So like that's where I think like people, I don't know, like I think and you don't have to be a martyr about it, about like shifting, what you eat. Like you were saying, it can be slow. Like let's take inventory of your day. And you're someone that's really busy. Well, what meal do you maybe have the most control over? Like maybe it's breakfast. Like maybe let's start there with like doing like a whole foods breakfast and trying to get a good serving of protein and one or two like plant or whole food sources in. So like if you do a bowl of oatmeal, do protein powder and then put some raspberries in it and maybe some chia seeds. And then, you got like a good, like nutrient dense, meal, and you can meal prep it before. It can be really easy, but just kind of instead of trying to overhaul your diet completely, depending on where you're at, like as far as that whole foods versus not, just kind of picking one meal and trying to, kind of revamp it a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that understanding why you would choose whole foods over something processed is
Yeah.
really important as well, because it's not just about desire and cravings and a relationship and telling yourself yes or no, but a meal that is chicken and baked sweet potato and asparagus is going to keep you fuller longer. It's going to make you feel better. Even if you're allowing yourself to have, two Pop Tarts. Two Pop Tarts is going to have more calories than your chicken and sweet potato and broccoli meal, and it's going to keep you fuller longer and keep you satiated. So, like, there's reasons, even if you're having a craving, to pick something that doesn't satisfy your craving but satisfies your hunger, because it is, in the long term, you're going to be fine with it once you eat it.
Right. Yeah. And also like the thinking back to like some of the whys behind the whole foods, like I think you kind of said it, but like your brain is going to function a lot better getting those micronutrients. So it might be hard at first to like make these changes, but I promise like once you kind of start doing more whole foods, drinking more water, like you'll start thinking a little clearer and these decisions might be a little bit more automatic. And yeah, you just have so much better results because we think about like thermic effect of food, so like how many calories like it takes to actually burn, process, assimilate, those nutrients from whole foods, it's going to be a little bit more than the processed stuff, but a little bit more over time adds up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big one. We could go all day about that, but yeah, I think, and even if you have cravings, like how can we whole foodify it? Like if you want something sweet, like can we do Greek yogurt with maybe some cinnamon and berries, or put like 2 squares of dark chocolate with it? I like to use like the protein plus rule with my clients. So if you want to have something like that, like like a cookie or whatever, like make a protein shake with it. Like that's kind of like the rule. And I think that's one, it's a good way to kind of step back and ask, am I really hungry? And then two, like it's a good way to kind of control your blood sugar a little bit and avoid like a major spike, and then have that snack be a little bit more filling if that's something you wanted.
Yeah. Oh, so on that blood sugar thing, I don't know if you can explain this better than I can, but I had a friend of mine. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the myths too that people try to incorporate or whatever. But she was saying how somebody she had seen on Instagram was talking about, like, preventing this blood sugar spike because that's what makes you gain weight. And I was like, that's not what makes you gain weight. Like a whole all over, a caloric surplus is what is going to cause, this weight gain to happen. But is it about, like, what is the problem with having a blood sugar spike and a drop? Can you explain that a little bit better?
Yeah. So over time, well, I like to explain it like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be riding like this crazy roller coaster of blood sugar swings where like your blood glucose, like your blood sugar is like going way up because you had, a meal that was maybe like just carbs, or like not balanced. So what I mean by balanced is you want to pick like two, I think audience is probably familiar with macros or like food groups. Like you could just say you want to have two food groups. So you want to have, a protein and a carb, or, a piece of fruit and some almonds. So like that would be like a carb and a fat. Like you want to have something balanced to prevent this major spike, which is going to leave you feeling like not so good. You're going to feel like hungry, shaky, moody, and then like you'll have like increased cravings. So yeah, and that's because like your body's like it's breaking down those carbs, right? And that glucose is circulating in your bloodstream. And if there's too much glucose because of the foods that you chose to eat, and you're not like doing something like training or just got off a workout, it's just kind of circulating there, and it's not able to be used as readily. But as far as like fat loss goes, like if we're talking like over time, like maybe, but like no, like it's not like you have a blood sugar spike and you're like, what were they saying exactly?
She was saying that I think somebody had said you want to prevent this blood sugar spike because that's when your body stores fat or something like that from this blood sugar spike. And I was thinking it more of, like you said, from an energy standpoint. You get a crash in energy, and if you're not.
Oh, okay. So I mean, yeah. So like I was saying, like over time, like so when you like I was saying, like the glucose is released in your bloodstream, right? And then your pancreas secretes insulin, which you hear about insulin a lot, and it gets like a dirty kind of connotation. And then the insulin takes up that glucose in your bloodstream, and your cells use it for energy, or they store it later. Now, if there's an excess, beyond, what can be used, or what the your muscles need or your liver needs, then over time, like it will be stored as fat, right? But that also is coming down to energy balance a little bit. So like, yes, there's definitely cases where like, I'm not going to say like yes, it is calories in, calories out, but then there's some cases or some people, their metabolic rate or whatever is going on. So it's not as simple as calories in, calories out always, but I
Yeah.
would say for most people it is. For a lot of people it is. And how do you know if that it's as quote unquote simple as that? go back to your basics, like nail the basics for a couple months and see what happens and see if you really think you might be weight loss resistant or insulin insensitive or whatever, you heard on social media.
Yeah. And I think two things are important. One, you said, one you didn't say. I think food pairing is important. I mean, I was talking to this friend of mine too, and it was just like, I often, like you said, like if I eat vegetables with something that is maybe not as healthy, like a cookie, it doesn't feel as, again, that's preventing probably that blood sugar spike because you have something fibrous going on as well. So, I think food pairing is absolutely like important. And also, she was talking about, this is preached a lot more too, going for little short walks after you eat or whatever too, because then you're utilizing that energy that you've taken in and kind of like coaxing that blood sugar drop rather than having the spike sitting at your desk while you're staring at your computer or whatever it is.
Yeah, because it's really like those big rises and falls where they're finding like that can lead to like, more damage over time and just be like, cause a host of like kind of downstream issues.
Yeah. Which again, I think leads a lot to, I'm not saying you can't out exercise. This is actually probably a good topic to talk about. Out exercise a good diet, but activity does help a lot, even if you're not taking in what we had talked about earlier as an optimal diet, moving around and such, neat walks after meals, etc., is going to, help with how you're feeling. But
yeah, because it helps like shuttle that glucose, into your muscles and into your post meal walks or even a walk before a meal. Are great ideas.
yeah, yeah. What was I just talking about there that I said we should talk about?
Exercise, not using
Oh yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of times people, I think this is so huge. People talking about like using exercise to burn calories. What would you, Sarah, what would you say are the different types of exercise and what are their purposes?
So I see this as a big issue with how women look at resistance training when they first start off. So the weight training, lifting,
Yeah.
is they see it as, I want to do as many sets, as many reps as possible. I don't want to take any rest times. I want to just lift super light and work up a good sweat to burn all the calories. And if my Apple Watch says I burned over 400 calories, it was a good workout. And like, that's like their thought process.
Yeah.
And no, like lifting should be like the purpose of lifting is to like send a signal to your muscles to adapt and to change and grow, and get stronger. And we want to do that with progressive overload, taking adequate rest times. And your marker of progress is going to be, are you getting stronger over time? Are you able to do more reps at a given weight over time? Are you able to increase your reps? Those are some good markers of progress. Is your form improving? One of my favorite things is like when clients start like building just more like body awareness. Like I felt my hamstrings for the first time, or like like even in their day to day, like they're just becoming more like aware of their body and how it moves and how it feels. And I feel like that's an underrated benefit of resistance training. But then if we're thinking like in the context of like, and yes, exercise burns calories, right? Like I'm not saying like that, but I'm just saying like when you look at your resistance training, you don't want to look at it as how I'm going to burn calories like in a diet. You want to think about things like your total movement outside the gym. So your step count, things like that, cardio, like using cardio to, drive more energy out if we're thinking that energy in, energy out. But yeah, I like, it depends on the person, but I'll usually say like, let's not try to like overdo the cardio. Like if for the means of like a fat loss, kind of standpoint. Now, if you're like a runner and like cardio is like your thing and you freaking love, running or whatever it is, like, yeah, like, okay, that's part of your program. That's part of your training and whatnot, but we're not going to use that to drive fat loss necessarily. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think that well, I mean, I know you and I listen to a lot of the same podcasts and follow a lot of the same people, and they would always say that, you know, when you're creating a caloric deficit, it's much more practical to create that in your diet than it is to try to do that with exercise, because you can so much easier cut out 250 calories from your maintenance calories than to, you know, I mean, that's probably like an hour of walking to get to burn 250 calories. And for, you know, people are like, oh, well, when I walk, it's like, well, what are you like you said, is it your Apple Watch? Is it the treadmill at the gym telling you?
Yeah, like, or you sweated, you did, you know, there was a lot of sweat coming off you. Like, yeah, so I agree. Like, I'll say, like, I'll usually use like a step count and progress that for a longer period of time
Yeah.
before I add cardio
Yeah.
for people.
I think people don't always realize either. I mean, this is something that we've discovered in the last 5+ years, that when you're in a caloric deficit, your body just naturally tries to conserve energy more. And this is why tracking your steps during the day has become so crucial when you're trying to lose weight, because a lot of times people will be like, oh, I just keep adding more cardio, but all they were doing was making up for energy that they weren't expending throughout the day in everyday activities, because you're trying to conserve energy because you're not taking in as much energy fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to like low hanging fruit, like just tracking your steps. And you don't even have to have an Apple Watch or like something expensive. Like Amazon has
Yeah.
like less than 30 bucks, 40 bucks,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's
I
exactly
use my
right.
phone. Like it's not perfect, but it's
Yeah.
pretty damn close. Like, you know, so like you don't have to be you don't have to make it like a big investment to start tracking these habits and making these changes.
Yeah. As long as your method is consistent. So if you're always using your phone, you
Right.
know, like you said, I got my watch off Amazon. I think it was $35. A great investment. It's a great investment. Super simple. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, step tracking is huge. You don't always have to just like, oh, I'm going to lose weight. I think people immediately jump to the fact like, oh, now I have to start doing cardio. It's like, no, you should probably start with your diet and see where you can cut something there first,
Mm-hmm.
how far that gets you.
Or what, yeah, or back to what you were saying before, like what can you add? Like if breakfast is on the go Chick-fil-A, you know, can we, you know, do something at home? Like, you know, boom, like you might save 200 calories right there.
Yeah. I love too what you said about, so I had gotten probably a couple of months ago, I just straight up got so sick of chicken. I just could not, like, I just, you know, would have been eating like chicken and rice meals for like 10 years now. So I'm just like, you know, and I was doing like, and I have been doing like bagel sandwiches, which like lunch meat and cheese, definitely not the same, but pairing it with a protein shake is always like helps you get extra protein in or whatever it is. So there's always things that you can do to adjust something so that if you can't do what is, like we said, optimal, you can find your level of optimal. I was listening to, I think it was a Huberman podcast, Huberman Lab, and they were talking about, they said concepts are few, methods are many, and I just love that, because we all know there are certain things you have to do in order to gain muscle and lose body fat, or, you know, whatever direction you're going, but there's so many ways to go about it depending on what your lifestyle has and your type of person and everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Um so I want to talk about uh a girlfriend of mine had put on a bunch of weight, and then she lost it and got to a point where she was like, I still would like to lose maybe another 5 or 10 pounds, but I'm realizing how much I have to grind in order to get there. So I want to talk about, because I think that's a lot of people that last 5 or 10 pounds. Maybe they think like that's the other side of happiness. You know, I don't know. Um, but I I think it's important to understand that where we want to be might not be where we want to be because of what it takes to get there and be there. Could you talk a little bit about what do you think of when you hear that?
Yeah, that's a hard conversation sometimes. It's that conversation. I mean, it could be several different conversations, but it's like, is this really worth it? And is this really worth it right now? So maybe like for your friend, for example, maybe she spent the last 3 months, dieting and she's kicking ass and made a lot of progress. And it's like, okay, like I really would like to see like another 5 pounds down or, my waist down a little bit more. And, I know that I have the fat to lose, but like, man, like I've been doing this forever. It's holiday season. Like what do I do? And like that's like the conversation of, hey, like maybe yes, we resume this fat loss phase, but let's take 12 weeks and another, like just kind of bring you back to maintenance, reverse, enjoy the holidays a little bit, be a little more flexible, be smart, go back to our habits, our foundations, and not like blow it, but yeah, like kind of try to maintain and go back at it again, after the holidays and whatnot. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's honestly a smart move in many cases because we can only diet for so long before the body, like before either we're gonna have to dig really low where it's not worth it, or just the body is just, hey, nah, like I've been working with you and like now I like you got to feed me and give me a little bit of a rest. So like that's like one conversation, but then I think maybe another conversation, depending on the person, is are you willing to do what is necessary? Like let's maybe take maybe more of an example of like a contest prep or someone that maybe, because I don't think there's anything wrong with having like vanity goals as long as we're smart about it. So like let's say like you really want to push, you really want to see abs, like you just want to do it in a healthy way, but you're not willing to give up the 3 glasses of wine that you're having a week, and you're not able to be adherent during the week, and you're not willing to increase your step count and go for an extra walk, like you're not willing to do these things, then it's like, okay, well then we can't be setting these goals because we're not willing to do what's necessary to achieve them, and we're going to end up upset at ourselves, upset probably at our coach or our program, because our values aren't matching up with our goals. And I mean that conversation, I gave maybe one example, but back to your friend, like maybe we aren't willing to sacrifice holidays with loved ones and maybe like the experience of baking cookies and enjoying a little bit of whatever the extra frosting, and like we're not like that's a tradition for us and we want to continue that tradition, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then we just might have to say that, okay, our rate of fat loss is going to be slower, or it really is a good time to start reversing right now.
Yeah, I think that peak of enjoyment and good energy and happiness is usually right above, like she's at that point where it is now going to where it is gonna, it's like people say they want abs, but it's like when you have abs you're tired and you're grumpy and you have to be 100% on point with your diet and your cardio, and life is
probably more body focused. Like that's what I find, like, and yeah, it's so hard for me to see. And honestly, like I see it more in like friends than I do in clients a lot of times. Is I see them still struggling with body image, and I know it's because they're hanging on to being lean. And I can only say that because your girl's gained 30 pounds in her improvement season, building season. And I know how much I think about my body now. And I know how much I thought about it when I did have more lines and stuff. And, granted, I've evolved, mentally and, worked through some things. But like, if you're trying to stay too lean or just too obsessed about being lean, even if your body's okay, quote unquote, and you can maintain it and you still have a cycle and whatever, it's like that, just that fixation and that obsession that's like underlying. It's like a low level baseline obsession, and it's like just taking up a little too much of your time in your brain.
that's a huge, I mean, that mental maturity is absolutely huge, and probably a space where you know that you are definitely in the recovery phase of eating disorder. Because I mean, I know I've been in the same place as you of being in an anorexic state where, you know, oh, family gatherings and oh, we're going out to dinner gave me such anxiety, and just the stress of oh, like dad's gonna order something not off the menu without any of this, that, and everything else so that it's plain, and then probably be upset because her meal came to her with, you know, like
Yeah, like that's was a very common scenario for me. And it's like you said, like it's the stress not only of the day and the dinner, but like probably the whole week leading up to the damn thing.
yeah.
Like, like, wow, like just all that brain capacity that you could use for something else.
Yeah. Which, I mean, unfortunately, we have people who are going to be listening who are thinking, well, I'm thinking about this in my overweight body right now. I'm obsessing about it right now. And, you know, I've talked about this before. I think a lot of that happiness that people are seeking in a physique, they can find in knowledge and making good choices so that happiness can happen right now.
I love that you said that because yeah, I did you yeah, that was I'm glad that you said that because exactly. It really has nothing to do with your body or your size. It has to do with doing things and accomplishing things. Like we're meant to succeed in that way. Like you probably feel crappy because you're not working toward a goal, and like it's finding the dopamine hit in like the process. So like, I went to the gym, like I and like let that be reward. And the body's gonna come, like it's gonna come, like you're gonna look how like it's gonna adapt and change as a result of just focusing on those habits and like focusing on the wins of adhering to these habits. And yeah, I think that's something Andrew Huberman talks about too,
Yeah.
actually, in this podcast.
Yeah. And it comes down to that, you know, everybody wants to have this stuff so fast, but it happens in the journey and in the behavior change, and in your accomplishments along the way are, like you said, what are getting you that dopamine hit and what makes the whole accomplishment worth it, because you struggled and put effort into working towards something. I mean, you don't appreciate things that are just a gift to you. They're not nearly as valued or valuable. So, I mean, this is why this sport is so amazing to me, and I respect so many of the people in the industry. It's because these are people who are passionate about something and were willing to put in the effort to earn something over time. You know what I mean? That's just respectable, regardless of if you like, if you like bodybuilding, or if you, I mean, that's what's respectable about an earned physique, is it is earned,
Yeah, it's attaching your sense of reward to like the process of that versus like the body.
Yeah.
A much more sustainable way to go about it. And this is like a hard, like, coaching conversation too. Like maybe someone's working on like their relationship with food, or working at just establishing habits in a maintenance phase. And, they're looking for like a physical reward, or, our rewards are maybe just more like long term, like our goals, excuse me, are more long term. So I really, encourage them to kind of start shifting and like noticing that, hey, it was a win that you were able to enjoy, that meal out and you didn't binge after, or, you were able to notice that you were feeling tired and take a nap instead of like letting yourself spiral and end up, in a place where you don't want to be. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, what else? Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on? I know there was a couple of things. I'm going to look over here.
I think just like maybe going back to the beginning, like talking about like low hanging fruit, like if you're working with a coach, like we'll usually like start off with like an intake form, right? And kind of get to know what's going on in your life and whatnot. But if you're someone that isn't able to work with a coach right now, like kind of start taking inventory of like some of your big pillars of your health and wellness, which for me is going to be your sleep,
Mhm.
your nutrition, your training, your stress levels. So like maybe just focus on those four areas. And hey, what maybe is the biggest thing that needs work? Like maybe you like, do lift 4 days a week and like, that's no issue for you, but your sleep schedule is just trash. And if that's something that you're able to work on right now, and what I mean by that, I mean maybe you're not like a nursing mom, or you're not like someone that really does need to grind right now to make means end. Like maybe the sleep is something that you focus on. And if sleep is something that does have to take a hit right now, maybe there's some areas of your diet that we can improve. Maybe it's increasing your veggie servings. So just kind of looking like and taking that like honest inventory of what needs to maybe change or what could change for the better.
I think that people don't recognize this trickle down effect of changing one of those things because everything is all tied together. You know, if you're not getting a good amount of sleep, it is going to be really hard to make any type of physique changes because, you know, hormones are going to be affected, your hunger, etc. You are going to be driven to make possibly poor food choices. Like you said, everything has a trickle down effect. I think, you know, if looking at your diet is daunting, just making sure that you get in, you know, like a pound, 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass every day is a really great place to start because, you know, like we talked about before, that can help with satiety and it will replace some of the other things that you're grabbing as far as like, you know, unhealthier like foods. And I think water is really important too. A lot of people are walking around dehydrated
I
and
should have put that as my own as its own pillar, because like water is like I feel like that's also, I'm like so like cliche, and that's like my cure for everything. Like, oh, you have a headache, drink more water. Like like can't poop, drink more water. Like, it's like, but it really is like it goes such a long way.
when I have client assessments, I feel like, I mean, I've had people be like, oh, they'll literally like say, I drink so much water. Like I drink a 40-ounce bottle every day. And I'm like, yeah, that's like half. And if you're active, like a third of what you're supposed to be drinking.
That's like, I'll just tell a story. My husband, he's so cute. He bought himself like a metal reusable water, and it's like a half-gallon one. So what's that, like 60 ounces or something like that?
Yeah.
It's big. And he's like, I drank that whole thing. Like, because I was telling him he needs to drink more water instead of grabbing like the third monster. And he's like, I drank that whole thing. And I'm like, that's great, babe. Like, I'm super proud of you that you've been able to make this a habit. But like, your next step is to drink two of those things. So, like, and it's like, oh, yeah, like kind of just realizing that so much is maybe more than you were doing before, but like,
Yeah.
now let's progress it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to start with what you can. I always say like the minimum is half your body weight in ounces. That's what they say. So that's your minimum. And it should be all water. Like, so not be like, you know, people like, oh, does my coffee count or does my protein shake count? It does, but I would just start with counting just the water.
Agree.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What else? What else do we got? Um, oh, you know what? I want to address a little bit of the 90s, like growing up in the 90s vibe. And so I know you get, and this is something actually you can probably share from experience, right? You had gotten to a point where you did your show, and then it was like, oh, you definitely needed to build more muscle, right? How often do you get women coming to you? Unfortunately, they're spinning their wheels in the gym because they're lifting weights, but they're only consuming, 1,200 calories in a day, right? I want to just address that you cannot build muscle from nothing. You can't.
Yeah, like you have to, and even like if you're eating 1,600 calories, like 1,700 calories, like you have to. I was just talking to a conversation. I was having a conversation with a client about this, and she's actually eating a good bit. She's eating, I want to say around like 2,300 calories or 2,400 calories, and she was feeling like it was just so much food. And her weight's essentially maintaining. And I was just, explaining that, hey, like, even though it might feel like, because we're tapering down her running volume and doing more resistance training. And even though it may not feel like you're burning a lot of calories in these training sessions, you have to also factor in the energy cost of, the repair necessary from these training sessions. And if our goal is to build muscle, the energy cost of not only just, building that tissue, but then maintaining it, and all of like the cellular processes that go on that back end, that's a very energy demanding process. So, for her, like, calories in a good spot, it was just kind of like wrapping your head around it being okay. But if you're someone that, yeah, like you're around 1,600 calories, like we're maybe eating enough to maintain and, maintain enough, maintain your bodily functions, but we're not eating enough to build and to change. And back to like kind of what you said, if you can't build from nothing, I get sadly like a lot of women that want to recomp, and they're like, it's like, honey, you're barely like in a healthy weight range, or like you barely have enough body fat, like you're like just in that healthy range, of like maybe what, 16-18%. Like,
yeah,
we got to eat a little bit more. Like there's not much to recomp here.
right. And that
I get it. Like I used to, like I was like 100 pounds soaking wet saying I want to recomp. It's like, what? Like you're like like I shouldn't say you're psycho, because I actually was mentally not there. Like, but yeah.
Sarah was institutionalized. We all know this, that that did happen. But
Actually.
but yeah, you like, I think the problem is like people are still at that, a lot of women are at that sort of a skinny soft stage. They want to look toned. They all say they want to look leaner. But if you've been eating, 12 to 1,600 calories for this long, you have to go up first before you're going to be able to come back down and shed any more body fat, because your body is just like, no, this is where we're going to be. And if we hang out here any longer, you're going to be using muscle for energy, and you're going to actually be, just getting softer and softer, smaller. Yeah.
It's going to take a hit, like no good. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole recomp thing, people make it sound so magical, but unless like this is the beginning of your journey, you've never lifted weights before. I mean, I think about that even now, because I wasn't training legs for a while with my knee injury and stuff like that. And, I lost this good chunk of weight over the last year and a half. And, it's like, okay, well, if I want to build that leg muscle back, the only thing I can do is, go into a surplus and start going back up again. I mean, there's just, you can't just recomp because you wish that to happen,
Yeah. I'll say, like, I see it happening most with people that have been, back to what we were saying before, like training, quote unquote, but like more seeing their training as time to burn calories and not really effectively weight training. Yeah. But if you want to recomp, you got to be patient. And that's something that I feel like many lack, which that's fine. And that's where I do feel like it's better approach things in phases for a lot of people.
Yeah. What have you, I'm going to say, like, I've noticed this a lot more, something over the years, but women do you superset things at all?
I will for some people, but not like, it's more of like a different kind of training stress. Like, hey, like we've been doing the straight set thing for a while, or we've been taking really long rest periods. Let's superset like as a different kind of stimulus. But this is more for like my more advanced people, or like, hey, if you're in a time crunch, like let's do our compound lifts, like maybe 3 or 4 compound lifts, and then let's superset our last 2 tricep exercises.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I think that's absolutely okay. But no, I'm not having you superset your squats with your hip thrusts, with your, I don't know what else. Like,
I think that the more you learn, like rest periods between sets is super important. Like probably longer than what people want to actually rest, which means you're going all out for your set and then you're resting to go all out like for 2 or 3 work sets, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to say 1 to 4 minutes is going to be for most exercises, sometimes even longer.
Yeah. Okay. And then again, yeah, with more of my isolations, you know, my workouts are usually set up with like something like there'll be 3 or 4 exercises that are straight sets, and then I'll have 1 or 2 more accessory type stuff at the end, be it like arm things or whatever. And those I can either cluster or do supersets with, like you said, again, because they're not so taxing. Like you don't have to rest a ton after your
Right.
curls.
Like between warm up sets, you don't have to rest like 4 minutes. Like,
Yeah. Yes.
you'll be okay. Like it's, if you're, but yeah, I think the most of our audience maybe needs to hear the longer rest period talk.
Yeah, because I think a lot of women are like, this is something this woman at my gym, it was probably 8 years ago or so. And she was like, oh, you know how us women need to train. We have to superset everything, keep our heart rate up. And I was like, what?
Yeah. Well, and also, and I think people think they need a superset to save time because they think that they need 8 exercises to have a good workout.
Yeah.
No, like for a leg day, 4 or 5 exercises, that could be plenty.
100%. Yeah. And that's also, I think the more advanced you get, because you're putting more effort and energy into, each set and each rep. And
Right.
it's learned, just like the recruiting of the muscle fibers. Yeah. Cause I mean, when I first started lifting, there was a lot more volume with a lot less intensity.
Yeah.
You have to learn that. But yeah, when you get to a point where, like you said, 4 exercises, 2 work sets of each one, you're
Yeah.
done. Yeah, you're done. Um, Sarah, is there anything else that you wanted to add before we in summary, anything that you wanted to say?
No, I think we covered a lot today. I mean, we could both rattle on all day, but I think we covered a lot.
I think it was really good. Everything from from the emotion of it up into like things that you can actually use in order to get going. So I appreciate your time. You always, like I said, I know I reach out to you quite a bit, like, hey, what are your thoughts on this?
I love the collaboration though. So thank you for having me on. And I think this was a good talk.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna do one more thing here. I'm gonna go to your Instagram, and this is Sarah's Instagram. I want to say I love following you. You are I know you talk about it sometimes, like, oh, maybe I should put more personal stuff up there, but you're 100% information, and you follow a lot of really great people. So stuff gets like you're always about collaborating and sharing really relevant evidence-based information. And I love too how you tend to explain things from the scientific perspective, but it's very palatable for the everyday person. And I think that like I said, if I follow your story, I'd probably learn like 3 or 4 new things, just because you tend to post stuff that other people
People are like, where do I get information, or like what accounts should I follow? And I'm like, just go look and see who I follow. Like,
yes, which I can't, like, we're in the middle, we're in that spot there of it. Oh no, this is like, yeah, so look at who Sarah is following, or if she posts something on her story that she shared from somebody, go check out that person's information. We are always sharing from evidence-based people, none of the influencers or the quick fix type stuff that that was something I wanted to touch on just real quick, about how people be like, well, what about this little trick, or what about this? And it's just like, what do you think long-term drinking a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar is going to do? Is that really going to be the difference between you losing 20 pounds, the 20 pounds you want to lose? Or do you think that maybe you have to implement some actual strategies?
yeah, if it sounds too good to be true, like, question it a little bit.
Yeah. So anyways, Sarah, I do appreciate you and all of your information, and so give her a follow. Sarah Ford Bishop. And you also have 2 podcasts if you want to quick plug those as well.
Yeah. So if you go to my link there, in that Instagram bio, I have my podcast, Unnamed and Untamed, that I do with some friends. Mine, Unfiltered, is kind of outdated. Well, not outdated. I just haven't done any in a while. But yeah, the second one there is going to be most of the newer stuff.
Yeah. And if you want to talk to Sarah about coaching, she has an application right there. So, perfect. All right, guys. Thanks for listening and watching to another episode of the Women's Fittest. You can find me on Instagram at buffcake22. You can follow the podcast at the Women's Fittest and find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember that healthy looks different on everybody. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thank you.
Have a great day.